Dear children, today we are going to start 7th chapter of Snapshot, that is Birth. It is written by A.J. Cronin. Birth is an excerpt from The Citadel that revolves around Andrew Manson, who just graduated out of medical school. It is an account of how the newly graduated medical practitioner helped in bringing Joe and Suzanne's child into this world despite going through a tough time with his girlfriend Christine. Okay, so let's begin the chapter. When Andrew reached his house at around 12 at night, he caught the sight of Joe Morgan climbing up and then down the stairs between his small clinic and the entrance to his house. On seeing Andrew, the heavily built driller, Joe, heaved a sigh of relief. Joe Morgan expressed how pleased he was to see Dr. Andrew. He tells Andrew how he has been waiting there for him for about an hour now. Joe's wife needs Andrew to examine her even before the time of her child's birth. She is in a critical situation. On hearing this, Andrew had a sudden flashback of the unpleasant night he had with his girlfriend Christine. But without wasting further time, he told Joe to wait outside while he got his bag. When he came out, they both began walking towards number 12 Blenna Terrace, where Joe's wife was. It was a cool night and the streets were silent, which made it mysterious. Andrew, who generally is full of life and spirit, was silent and lacked energy. Andrew had no idea what the night had in store for him and that it was going to influence his life in Blenley. They both walked silently till they reached number 12. As soon as they reached, Joe revealed to Andrew that he does not intend on coming in, but he showed full confidence in Andrew. Joe's voice was tense and he was under pressure. Andrew entered the gate alone. He took the stairs, which were of rather small width, and reached a bedroom. The bedroom was not lavish or luxurious, but it was neat. Inside the room were Joe Morgan's mother-in-law, a woman of around 70, with larger than the average height and grey hair, along with a pulp midwife to assist the childbirth. The midwife was also of an elderly age. They both sat beside Mrs. Morgan and they were waiting for Andrew. The sweet old lady, means Mrs. Morgan's mother, offered Andrew a cup of tea. She addressed Andrew as Bash, which is used while displaying affection. Realizing that the old lady might be worried about him leaving during the waiting period, he gave her a gentle smile and comforted her by assuring that he will not go away. The fact that she anticipated the period of waiting and was worried about him running away made Andrew realize that she was wise and had plenty of experience. He sipped the tea in the kitchen downstairs. Though he was mentally and physically exhausted because of the unpleasant meeting with Christine, he knew it was impossible for him to even get an hour's worth of sleep if he went home. Although new in his line or practice, he was aware that the situation was critical and called for his attentiveness. Strangely, he felt a bit active and decided to stay at the place till his duty was fulfilled. He went upstairs after almost an hour to check upon Mrs. Morgan. he sat near the kitchen fire upon coming back. It was that time of the night where everything was still. The only sounds that came was of the ticking clock, Joe's footsteps from the outside, and from the almost extinguished piece of coal. While he sat in the kitchen, Mrs. Morgan's mother sat in front of him wearing her black dress. She looked at him constantly with her wise eyes that were filled with hope. Clearly, the earlier unpleasant moments with Christine had taken a toll on his mind. He was still being haunted by the incident that took place at Cardiff Station. He began thinking of his friends and acquaintances who have had bad experiences in love and marriage. He thought of Bramwell. The woman he loved had cheated on him. He contemplated upon the relationship of Edward Page, who was committed to a dominating woman named Blodwin. He reflected upon how Danny is living away from his wife not so happily. All of this brought him to an inference that made him cringe. He wished to believe that the institution of marriage was a cheerful one that guaranteed peace and companionship. He also had no other reason to believe otherwise with Christine's shining eyes in his mind. He was undoubtedly facing a conflict with all his mind, heart, and soul in disagreement. He thus rested his chin on his chest and pulled out his legs while he glanced at the fireplace. He sat still for a few moments. His mind was still preoccupied with Christine until the old lady broke her silence. She was thinking about something else. The old lady tells the doctor how worried Susan was on account of this complicated situation. She even refused to have anesthesia if it were to affect the baby. She told him how invested she was in the child. The old lady corrects herself and says that all of them are invested in the child. Her eyes were filled with warmth while she said this. The doctor, preoccupied with another set of worries, somehow cleared his mind and assured the old lady that the anesthetics would do no harm to either of them. Suddenly, they heard the voice of the midwife calling upon them. Andrew saw that it's already 3:30 and that he shall begin with the procedure. Thus, he got up to go to the bedroom upstairs. It took him almost an hour to perform the surgery. It was a rather tough one. While the first rays of daylight came inside from the corner of the window, the Morgan child was born, but unfortunately the child was cold and still. As he continued to look at the lifeless child, a shiver passed down his spine, while his face was heated because of the efforts he put in. A wave of coldness held him. He was devastated. Moreover, he was confused. He couldn't get himself to choose between addressing the stillborn or the miserable mother. He could not make the decision consciously, so he intuitively addressed the mother first while giving the child to the nurse. Susan laid unconscious too, as the effects of the anesthesia still persisted. He put in all his efforts to bring her out of the desperate state, even while her strength continued to weaken. He instantly broke the medicine's glass to fill the syringe and inject it into her. He worked tirelessly to bring her to her senses. After a moment, when he was assured that she was safe and her body was beginning to regain its strength, he turned his attention to the child. His hair was all over his sweaty face, but he did not waste another moment. Andrew hastened and asked the midwife about the child. The midwife got anxious and asked him where the child was. She had kept it under the bed. Without wasting another moment, Andrew took the child out. It was a boy in perfect shape and with flawless skin. His body was warm and his skin was extremely soft. The head hung loosely on his weak neck, and the cord was hanging too from his body. His limbs felt boneless because the bones were so soft. Still bent to take the child out from beneath the bed, Andrew glared at the child. He observed him and thought about the reason he was so white. And he knew it could only be a case of oxygen deprivation because he had seen a similar case in Samaritan. He focused on the treatment that was used. He instantly stood up and instructed the nurse to bring in hot water and cold water in separate tubs. The nurse hesitated because for the moment she thought the efforts were useless, but the doctor hastened and shouted on her to get it done instantly. While she had gone to take what he told her to do, Andrew grabbed a blanket and laid the child on it while he performed the unique respiration method. The nurse arrived with the necessary items and he began with the procedure instantly. In one basin, he put cold water alone, and in the other, he put hot water at the temperature he could bear. The next moment, he was seen dipping the child in those basins one after another. He continued doing it. He felt that he had failed, and suddenly all his hope was beginning to fade. He could feel the nurse gazing upon him, disheartened. On the other hand, there was the old woman who couldn't utter a word. Her eyes were constantly fixed upon him. He instantly remembered how badly she wanted a grandchild. Moreover, he remembered how her daughter was waiting for one. It was all a waste now. After the continued struggle, the floor was extremely wet and dirty. The doctor almost slipped on the towel and he was just about to lose hold of the child. The child was also wet and he is being compared to a white fish. The midwife then pleaded before the doctor and told him to stop as the child is still born. Just as it was a miracle, the little chest which was enclosed in Andrew's hands took a breath. He continued heaving, leaving Andrew weak in his knees. The feeling of the little one's breathing on his fingers almost made him faint. Instantly, he worked on reviving him with double the efforts until the child breathed deeply. As he gasped, a bubble formed by the mucus was formed from his tiny nose. His pale skin turned pink, and the body no longer felt like it was lifeless. The next instant, he started crying. The nurse muttered the words of prayer while tears rolled down her eyes. As Andrew handed her the child, he felt extremely weak and tired. The room was obviously a mess by this time. All the equipment, including blankets, towels, basins, soiled instruments, the hypodermic syringe, the ear, and the kettle were all in a terrible state. The mother lay still on the bed. The anesthesia still had its effect. Suzanne's mother stood still in one place, constantly moving her lips in prayer. Andrew unfolded his sleeve and put on his jacket while informing the nurse that he will take his bag later. He then went into a small room through the kitchen downstairs and grabbed a large glass of water. He took his coat and hat and headed outside. He met Joe outside and told him that everything was fine. It was around 5 in the morning and there was not too much light. While walking towards his home, he was accompanied by a few miners who had just completed their night shift. As their footsteps echoed, he had only one thing in mind. His heart was full of the thought that he finally accomplished something. So, this is about the chapter Birth.